I'll give you a moment to read our purpose for today. We're going to continue to deepen our understanding of the structure of problem strings through our formative assessments, our surveys, our implementation guides. We're seeing that that's still a place where we need to live in for a little bit. And then we are also going to start looking at facilitation moves that happen in order to implement them in the classrooms. I'll allow you to read through our outcome for today in the highlighted yellow. Again, reflecting that we're going to live in that structure of problem strings and identify when and how to implement them in our classrooms. And our learning targets, which is living on the screen now, but over near Marcus. It will be there for the rest of our time together. That reflects us still understanding the structure of problem strings through identifying facilitation moves, but also being able to create them for our learners. I loved reading through implementation guides, but a lot of the feedback I got was this is so hard, and it is so hard. It's still hard for us to come up with valuable ones for our learners. So knowing that we're in this together, that's what we're going to do today.
And the hope for the feel of this is that it's going to feel like a lab, right? So we have some videos that we're going to watch today based on your responses from our last session. And we're just going to sit down. These aren't necessary exemplars, just like this morning, but it's something for us to talk about. It's hopefully where you're living, of getting into the minds of those that have been able to create those problem strings and facilitate those, what kind of went through their head, and then having time to plan those afterwards. So it should have a lab feel today.
And that moves us perfectly into our agenda. We're first going to talk about some successes we've had in our classroom around problem strings. We're going to have a chance to offer some wonderings we have around problem strings. We will then move into the lab feel of this and do some authentic learning, watching some videos and having conversations around those, and then end with some planning time. We won't see you for a few months, so we need to get some planning in and set some goals for the time we'll be away.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Kelly. Then next time we'll actually be here together is in February. So November, end of November till end of February, mid-February. So we want to make sure that any questions that you have about problem strings that we can collectively discuss, did get discussed today. So know that there is time around the authentic learning and just after for us to just open it up for dialogue and say, what do we need to make sure we can take this back to our classrooms?
To get started, our inclusion activity today is on the screen. I'll give you a moment to read through it before I explain it also. So in a moment, you'll have an opportunity to stand and make eye contact with a partner. And you will be reflecting around what is one success you've been able to record in your implementation guides as you continue your journey with problem strings. So one success you have had and you've been able to record in your implementation guides around problem strings. Partner A will share first. Partner B will pause, paraphrase, then you will switch roles. Be prepared to share at the end, and know that if you are volunteering to share, we are going to ask if we could look at your implementation guide. So everyone has, I feel like this implementation guide is kind of this vague thing a little bit sometimes. And in order to create clarity around that, we'd really like to take a look at one. And also for the purpose of knowing our implementation guides better, but also for the purpose of seeing those successes in pictures or visuals or however you represented that there. So know that that's going to be a piece of it. We will ask you to look at those.
Are there any questions about either the process or the intent? What questions might there be? We're on it. Great. So think to yourself, what might be one success that you have recorded in your implementation guide? And then when you have that idea in mind, feel free to stand and make eye contact with someone around the room and engage in the process displayed. Enjoy your conversations. As I floated around and listened to some of the conversations, I heard a paraphrase. You were successful with. I saw someone with a piece of paper sharing their problem string, which I believe was, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, Cavalieri's principle for area of a circle. So that was pretty cool to see how a circle might unfold to get closer to a parallelogram. define the area of a circle. So there's some really cool thinking going on and sharing. So we appreciate your authentic conversation, your authentic networking. Kelli, do you want to lead and I'll drive the implementation? Right?
Who might be willing to share their successes based on their implementation guide, knowing that we will ask you if it's okay if we bring it up on the screen?
And once again, the purpose of this is really twofold, right? One, we want to be able to celebrate and share the journeys that we're on right now because we need each other to support us through this process. And secondly, we're entirely guilty of not giving you enough time with the implementation guide last session. So this is an opportunity for us to create clarity in the implementation guide and what it could look like. So with that being said, who might be willing to share their implementation guide or successes? I'll let Kelli run this.
Okay, we have 1 and 2. Thank you so much. So Marcus is going to be quick on his feet with the computer.
So Molly, would you mind sharing a little bit about the content, your success, and then what you recorded in your implementation guide?
So my implementation guide is kind of like random thoughts by Molly. I feel like I just kind of go there and there's a lot of ellipses and things in my. There's nothing like a formal document. It's just kind of rambling to reflect. But our text series actually has problem strings within the text, so I feel really blessed that I have that resource that I can just go and say, okay, let me try this. So I've actually tried to write from the text series this week with my students. We're dealing with exponents and solving equations, and I know, I even say to my students, it's not until you have a lot of practice with solving equations with exponents, with exponential functions, that you feel success. And so we're going to unpack some of this together. You're going to discover some properties that you might apply in a backwards direction or try a different property. So I feel like my students are kind of like Bob the Builder's, they're all willing to try all these different resources. And so what I've seen so far is that since they're kind of creating their own properties and how those work, instead of me maybe formally telling them, here's all the properties, now make them work for you, by them creating those properties themselves and seeing how they work and really monkeying around with them and really kind of getting messy with them, solving has been easier than it's ever been for me. And I don't know if it's them, if it's me, if it's a combination. But so far, solving hasn't been the headache that it's always been for my students. And so I feel like that's a success.
Yeah, so it sounds like you really value that time for them to grapple with it and that productive struggle, and it's paying off, right? They're transferring that learning into solving them in a surprising way. That's exciting. We'll take a look at it.
So notice the commitment. The intention. So here's a quantity here. 1 problem string in the text series, the one that I create per unit. So it's timely. It holds you accountable to, oh, I need to make sure I do this. If you're anything like me, you need to hold yourself accountable sometimes. So this is an example of what one could look like.
And I do love reading through those reflections because it really is just random thoughts and how you process those.
I know that for the evidence here, this is kind of a precursor of where we're going. I asked Molly to record her high school problem string so that we could have conversation around it later. So you'll notice here that she just wrote in those items of the text series of where they are. So we actually have the recording to go with that evidence. But if you don't have the recordings, put that in there. Just feel free to take a picture of the board. There's so much value and rich conversation that's in that picture. Just take that and load that in here. That can certainly serve as a process as well.
Thank you, Molly.
And reflection. So this was not queued up at all. I don't think Molly knew that she was going to share this before today. But it seems like she was really intentional with her actions and then obviously with her reflections too. This is one example of an implementation.
All right, and we have number 2.
So mine, I did 2 problem strings. That was my commitment and my intention. And my first one was going well, until we got to my clunker, and the clunker was a real clunker. And so for next time in my reflection, I just said that I would change that just a little bit to make it a little more accessible for at least some of the students in my room. And then the second one I felt a lot of success with, mostly because I think I did it too late in my unit. We're doing division right now, and I probably should have done it earlier in the unit. But I really enjoyed the setup of it. Purposefully wrote down questions on sticky notes so that I had it all planned out and ready to go. And it was very successful, even in the fact that so many different ideas were on the table. So a lot of students could access not only the first problem, but several of the problems. The only problem I ran into is that kids just wanted to keep sharing all these different ways they could do it. But I just kind of had to hold them off and move on, hold them off and move on. So again, for next year, when I use this, I'll just use it a little earlier in my division unit. And for the multiplication one, I'm going to change that clunker.
So you're surfacing again how tricky it is to make these a right fit for our students and where they're at. The first one you found was too challenging when it came to the clunker. You want at least to be able to have some dialogue around that clunker. And then the second one you felt was done too late almost. They had too much knowledge on it. So having that balance between what's challenging, what's a clunker, what's too hard, and what's too easy is definitely a challenge in here. Great reflection though, and I love how we think like in the future, right? And each of these is a learning process.
Another example of what it could. Brittany, could you just speak a little bit about the technical aspect of taking the picture and posting it? Like, how did that go for you?
Oh, very easy. I enjoy technology, so it was kind of easy for me. Even though the sticky note process doesn't look a real technologically advanced, it was just something that I kind of threw together on the fly before I was going to teach it. So uploading it was very easy, though.
And what process did you go through? So for those that are in the room that aren't as comfortable with technology, could you maybe describe like the sequence that you went through?
Yeah, so I just took a picture of it, and then I airdropped it. You can email it to yourself as well. And then I clicked where I wanted it in the implementation guide, and then inserted it as an image, and it was there. It shows up really big at first, and then just decreasing that size, you're able to manipulate it and make it a little smaller.
So one option is if you have Mac products or Apple products to airdrop it to yourself. We love Apple for that reason. If you do not have Apple products, then it just helps to maybe mail it to yourself, and that way it's then you can download that image before dragging it into your implementation. Thank you, Britt.
And it was interesting when I was reading through your implementation guide, I saw how you did those sticky notes, and I was like, oh, I need to do it that way, right? We always say we're here to learn with you, and that's completely 100% honest and true. Because I took little pieces from each one of your implementation guides to bring back to my own classroom. Thank you for that.
Additionally, kind of off the cuff, Kelly, I hope you're okay with this. I noticed that some people were posting in Google Classroom as well. So I think we had 27 of the 32 of you were interested in additional support. And I know we've been leveraging Google Classroom conversations a little bit. Would someone mind just speaking about Google Classroom, whether it works for them or isn't working for them? Because I know a few people posted in there the problem strings that what they were doing. Was that valuable for others to see that, first of all? So I'm seeing a few head nods. Would anyone mind sharing their thoughts relative to the Google Classroom feed? And whether that's a viable place for us to put some of our resources for each other?
I might offer that, sorry, one thing I know that's tricky is that you don't always get notifications when things are posted in there. I know I get notifications like if Mark is posted, and you might if we post, but I don't always, like I checked it the other day and I was like, oh, 3 people have posted.
Yeah.
I feel terrible that neither of us have responded. So kind of logistical things we need to work out with that. But sorry.
That was going to be my comment too. That would be helpful if I had notifications, because I don't, to go there as well, or I would probably.
Sure. So some people have been able to post items in there, and I think Scott from Cedar Springs posted that he was interested in some secondary examples. I did not This isn't my computer, so I can't get there quickly, but I'll show you later. I didn't know that you could turn on notifications as well, so we can walk you through that process of turning on those notifications. That's something we figured out in Caledonia a couple of weeks ago, so we can move forward from there. Hopefully that's a viable place for us to just put some thinking and put some items down there so we can collaborate in between now and February. So thank you. So as we progress forward, once again, this is going to have a lab feel. Kelly, would you mind clicking the next slide? Yep. We want to make sure that your questions get addressed. So our next process is for you to just grab a sticky note or two, each person, and write down one thing that is standing out to you about problem strings in the past or in the future that you have questions about. So what questions do you have around what you have experienced with problem strings or that you anticipate having in the future? What are some wonderings you have with problem strings? So please record 1 or 2 sticky notes, 1 question per sticky note. And if you wouldn't mind putting those on the wonderings poster back there behind Adrian in the center of the room, we will use these to drive our conversations later. So I said a lot. Record 1 or 2 wonderings about problem strings, and attach them to the wonderings chart in the back, and we will use those to drive our conversations for the rest of the afternoon, rest of the session. So what Kelly's doing right now is just looking and orienting her thinking towards that. So that's our formative assessment for what you might need for the rest of our session. And those questions will then be incorporated in our small group conversations, and then having time as a whole group to discuss some of those larger items with the whole group afterwards. So we know we're ambitious, but that's how things get done. That's how they work in education. We want to make sure we honor your time where you're at, though. So we are going to transition forward, and we're going to dive into these videos in just a moment. So I'll pause and allow you to read through the process that we're going to engage in to view these videos. And so to honor your requests, we do have 3 different number strings or problem strings that were recorded. And we're going to split into those 3 groups. What that will look like is over here by this monitor on this side of the room. This is where the secondary group will go. And we're going to huddle around that monitor and show the video of the secondary problem string in this space. The monitor on this side of the room is going to be the 5th grade example. So if you're part of the 5th grade group, you're going to this side of the room in just a moment to observe a 5th grade problem string around division, visual division actually. And then you're wondering about the early elementary group. Early elementary group, you're going to go with Kelly and go on a minor field trip down the hallway. You'll walk with Kelly. She's a kindergarten teacher. She knows how to manage groups. So make sure you don't get lost on the way to another space. But Kelly and the early elementary group are going to go down the hallway to the mall where you have a nice conference room set up where Rusty is going to help with technology. But that's where the early elementary folks will be having their conversation. Okay. Once you're in those small groups, we will take time to ensure that there is safety and there is productivity within the group by establishing those norms and expectations for one another of how we speak to one another and making sure that this is a productive time for all of us together. You will have identified facilitators for each of those groups. For the early L, it's going to be Kelli VanSetters. For the 5th grade group, it's going to be Molly Carl, and it's actually her video from 5th grade. And then the secondary group, I will be facilitating that around Molly Muschetti's problem string that she so kindly offered to the group. Establishing expectations, and then periodically we'll just pause it and say, what are you recording? What's on your mind? So we can really process the information from a student's perspective, but also the teacher's perspective throughout. You should have received a recording sheet, a recording document. Did you receive one of those documents as well? Could someone hold one up? Yes, perfect. That one right there. Would you mind holding that up for the group? So the recording sheet looks like this. It has 3 columns on it. Did it not make its way around here? Okay. Thank you. This will be where you record the teacher moves, the facilitation moves, students' strategies, and then the structures. What structures are you noticing? Is there a helper? Is there a challenge? Is there a clunker? And what might those be? So this is an opportunity for us to think about the structure of problem strings as well. Okay. We've identified a time of 2:20 to be back in this space. 2:20, as the facilitators around the room smirk. 2:20 is our goal to be back here. Okay. What questions might we have about our time together in analyzing the videos of problem strings? Yeah, Adrian?
Will the fifth grade be accessible? Is that on the classroom will be accessible to everyone? So like if I go to the lower L, will I be able to see the other things?
At this point, it is not, but I wonder if we can get approval from those that did record them. And I just saw a head nod from Molly saying that she's comfortable sharing her video as well. Okay, so yes, I'll post those in the Google Classroom. Mm-hmm. Okay, what other questions might we have? Perfect. So if we could pack up our stuff, locate secondary over here, upper L, 5th grade on this side, and early L with Kelly. If you could come to the front by Kelly. Looks like we've got the perfect size group for this too. In just a moment, we'll dive into the video. And I do want to paint a little bit of context around how this was done, and then Molly, you can speak to that too. But I think it was the week before Thanksgiving. I said, hey, Molly, are you going to record? And she was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So we planned a day, we did some planning, and then the day came, and Molly was not feeling well.
I went to school that day, gotta make the 6
And I told her, do not do that, right? Like, take care of yourself, take care of your students first was the message. So that led to Thanksgiving break, and then the snow day. So it was like, Molly, are you sure you're comfortable with this? Because I don't want to force it. We can come up with plan B if needed. And she's like, no, that's fantastic. I'll just take care of it. So I just want to applaud Molly publicly for being willing to do this for us. So let's just keep that in mind that we know we have 100 things going on in our classrooms, and Molly had 101 the last couple of weeks. So thank you, Molly, for offering that to the group. And as we said this morning, that this is where we are, and that's perfectly fine, right? We're all on this journey in different spots together. We're all going to take some great things out of this, and we're going to construct some new knowledge together around the experience itself. So with that being said, if everyone could turn to the side that has the 3 columns, I guess I should grab a sheet. And at the bottom are several norms. So I ask that you read through those norms, and we'll just have a quick conversation on what norm we might want to add or adjust. So I'll pause for you to read through those norms. What modifications, if any, are needed for those? So what modifications might be needed for these norms? What could be adjusted or what could be added as we engage in this conversation for 35, 40 minutes? Can I get a thumbs up if we're all okay if you are okay with those norms that have been identified? Perfect. Okay. So what we'll do now is we'll start the video, and on your recording sheet, this is open. This is our idea of equity for you to attach whatever schema or whatever mindset you are bringing to this to orient yourself towards those 3 columns. So enter this space as you will, whether you're looking for questioning, whether you're looking for students thinking, or the structure of problem strings themselves. And then in a few minutes, we'll just pause the video, and then I'll open it up for dialogue using the sentence stem. I notice blank and I wonder. And then we'll just have conversation. Okay. Maybe before we begin, if you could think of one focus area that you want to be mindful of in the video, and then we'll just round robin share those for each other. So let's think to ourselves, what might be my focus for this video? Or my focus? And then when we're ready, Scott, would you mind sharing when you're ready? That's fine. Do you have a focus for what you might be looking for in this video? Is it questioning or student strategies or structures?
Well, structures, the string themselves, and then the teacher moves.
Mm-hmm.
Discourse moves.
Okay, thank you. Pam? Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I wrote down the student-to-student interactions.
Thanks.
I wrote down when should the teacher push the students to extend versus when should the teacher extend.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
That's the wording of the question.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking at the structure.
So it sounds like overall questioning, and then the sequence of questioning, and then how deep to go, and when to let the students move and when to let the teacher move. So I'm a little bit off here, so.
The right student that's in front, keep it in front, because you could let everybody know. You can turn on my microphone a couple times, just ignore him.
Are we watching
Creative.
chunks?
Yes, so we're just going to watch about 2 minutes or so first, and then we'll move forward from there. See how this goes with the other group.
About to take on, we are going to be thinking about all of the properties that we learned so far. So we've learned lots of different properties on exponents, but we're moving into solving equations. And I'm going to speak from experience here. The more problems that you try to solve, the more equations that you try to solve, the better you get. Because there's lots of different properties that you have to apply. And to be successful, James, you have to know which one to apply and when. But the nice thing about the properties is there's not a set fast one rule that you need to apply all the time. You get to choose different rules. So today we're going to be successful if we can find a solution and we check to see if that solution is correct. So if I say infinity is viable, we're just going to check to see if it's correct. Sit way up here for me, please. Further than that. Further. Oh, not that far. Let's see if we can get this, okay? If you have an idea, you're going to show me by putting a thumbs up. I'm going to write 3 to the power of 12. And my first question is, what is something I could write on this line here that would make this true? What could I write on this line to make this true? You don't have to talk to anybody. You're just showing me you have an idea by putting a thumbs up. If you're not sure, you're just looking at the board. We're not doing a turn and talk yet. Camden, what's your idea? 3 to the 4th power. Can you justify your answer? Okay, so when we have parentheses, the exponents will multiply by each other. So it becomes 4 times 3, which is 12. So you're applying a property of power to a power. It's one of the properties that are in our book. Let's see if that method will help us solve this next problem. I'm going to write the base of 3, the exponent of 12 again. But this time, I want you to figure out what goes on this line. Just a thumbs up if you have an idea. If you don't have an idea, you're just staring at the board. We don't need a calculator for this activity, so if you're feeling tempted, flip your calculator over. I'll let you know when you can use your calculator. No calculators. You should be okay without it. Do you have an idea for me, Sarah? What do you got? If you have 2, what were you thinking to justify that answer? Because 6 times 2 is 12, and this is power to a power also. Okay?
So there were a number of items to talk about. So what this next step will look like is Molly and I will just have a conversation around some things that are standing out to her and maybe creating more context around what happened. And then we'll open it up to the group to share around Robin, I noticed blank and I wondered blank. And then we can have a whole group dialogue around those noticings and wonderings. So Molly, what are some things that are standing out to you in the video or items that might create further context for the group?
So the day prior, we actually did a problem string around the idea that so students are comfortable with 9 to the 5th power. Students are comfortable with x to the 5th power. They're okay with extending. They're okay with properties like x to the 5th power over x squared, and they can simplify. They're okay with either extending or applying a property as x1 is minus x1. They know they don't have to memorize these properties if they want to extend. What we went to on Tuesday of this week when we got back from Thanksgiving break was, what if our x1 is 9 to the 3 halves? So they were comfortable with 1/2 was taking a square root. They were comfortable with a negative flips a fraction or takes a reciprocal. So now we have a rational exponent. And so what we're really trying to get students to understand is that I can be flexible in my thinking and I can split up the 3 halves into 1/2 and cubed. Or if I have a rational exponent of 4/3, I can take the cube root first and then raise it to the 4th power. Or I can do the 4th power first and then take the cube root of it. So the whole basis of the day before. So this kind of helps unpack that we can kind of split things up as we want to. We can put things together as we want to. It's just going to be depending on what we need to do with that. And so that's kind of the setup for the rest of the problem string. In the problem string itself, it says these 4 problems are optional. And I decided to go ahead and do them with my students as good review from the day before.
So really this was a synthesis of the expanded form or the extended form of those. And it's to see, it's your formative assessment. It's synthesizing those different approaches that students have within those. So that certainly helps with the context. Is there anything else that you'd like to share around either what you noticed or might be helpful for us to know, Molly, before?
I noticed that I asked a couple of students to actually verify their answers, and then with Santos, I didn't ask him to verify his answer. Sarah had offered up the last answer, and she hadn't been there the day before. So instead of asking her to verify her answer, I wanted to kind of get a quick scope of them. So I said, put your thumbs up if you agree with Sarah. So I was trying to do different things to check in with students and keep all students engaged. So I kind of always wonder about like how much or too much or not enough of what I'm doing with problem strings, because I feel like I'm stuck at the front with problem strings. So I'm kind of struggling with that currently, but trying to do small things to take steps forward to remind students they're all still a part of this conversation, even if you're not talking.
So you're saying at the beginning being mindful of the pace at which you go through those problems? Is that what you're referring to, Molly?
Pacing, and then proximity for me, I feel very stuck at the front. And so what ways can I at least get even if they're lying to me, like I'm okay with this, or I'm still in with you since getting
Okay, perfect. And I would wonder what we might hear from the group too, that we can construct more understanding. So and we don't need to round robin this, we'll just popcorn share. I noticed blank and I wonder blank. Who might be willing to get us started?
I noticed you made the comment a couple times about not using calculator. I wonder, were kids grabbing their calculator, or were you just reminding them from the previous learning that this is more of a property type thing I want them to go for?
What were you thinking?
Anytime I said it, I noticed students, either 2 or 3 students on them. Usually I can make eye contact and try and make it, but if I notice a few students doing it, I said it out loud.
What questions do we have off of that? Do you want to jump in, Ryan?
Oh.
I didn't know if you had a question or not.
Oh, no, not necessarily.
Okay.
Maybe a separate wondering, but not a separate calculator.
Okay, we'll come to you maybe next.
Yeah.
So something I noticed, Molly, too, and I definitely want to position myself as a facilitator but also learner with you, is I noticed at one point you prompted students that it's okay to write on paper, and I wonder how often students take advantage of that.
I think some students they go to that paper like religiously. Some students just need that physical anchor. And from the problem string prior, the day before, I actually made them close everything down and they can only use mental math or their calculators. And at different times I told them they could or couldn't use their calculators. And I feel like I lost students. So this day I actually intentionally gave every student a piece of scrap paper and said, students also know that after this problem string, we form together in
down, otherwise it's going to be lost. So I have some students that freak out about that, like, well, I didn't write it all down. In every other math class, I've always had to write it all down. And so trying to break that habit of, we'll take care of that after. So the scrap paper is kind of a crutch for some students. It helps them stay engaged with other students. For other students, it's just helpful if they use it once in a while. But some people had nothing on their paper. Other people had everything on their paper.
Yeah. It's more of you want it to be a scaffold for students, not a compliance issue of having to write that down.
If they choose to.
Sure.
So I think that as we roll forward, some students will find it beneficial to write some things down and not write other things down. A couple of students actually asked to keep their scrap paper when I went around and said, would you like me to recycle that for you? And they said, no, I'd like to keep it. So there must have been some thinking on that piece or that they wanted to hold on to.
For those of you that have tried problem strings as well, how has that process gone for you with students writing things down or not?
I've noticed the same thing. That some will use paper, some won't.
Is that something you feel like you encourage, Pam? Is it just kind of open, or what are your thoughts on?
At first, with the first one, I encouraged that they have it, but I haven't gone so far as to provide it every time.
In my classroom, we have more of an open area at the front, and coming from more of an elementary, now heading middle school background, like we do problems strings by they all come up and sit toward the front, whether it's in a chair or on the floor. So like we get rid of all the distractions of everything on their tables and everything, and it's more like a meeting time. And so my kids don't tend to, I don't tell them they can't if they bring things to write, but they feel more comfortable with just gathering and having that as a discussion piece rather than having to write that down.
Sure. So changing the physical proximity to where students are. Ryan, maybe we'll take your question and you're wondering, and then we'll move forward from there.
Sure. I noticed that it seemed very intentional to create a safe environment at the beginning. I was just wondering kind of why and how often you might do that, and maybe if you could speak a little bit to how that benefited maybe the student mindset going in.
So I think it's something that I've intentionally, that was kind of my overall goal for this year, is to help students work in a cooperative setting, in a collaborative setting, to extend their thinking and to own their thinking. And so in my goal, my professional goal, that my evaluators even are ready, it's around student relationships. And so I know I have to foster that. And so students are actually in groups of 4. The students that you see they're facing the board. Currently I have the swivel chairs, which are a curse and a blessing at the same time. Typically the students that are sitting, like the student in front and the student behind her, they're typically shoulder partners, but they're pretty flexible in turning forward, and now I have a new shoulder partner. And so later on you'll actually see that I ask them to talk with each other. So I know that research like from Kagan says that I'm allowing my students a couple opportunities during the lesson, during the week, to interact with each other in a safe way or in an interesting way or a care about you way, like the trying to tell your partner something that nice happened to you today. It makes me care about your learning also. And so I try to do anything that I can to encourage them to be open to share their ideas, to have a conversation, to write down their thinking. Sometimes it's more successful than others. I don't know if I answered the question exactly, but...
So we want the students to be successful mathematically, but we also want them to be humans and have a relationship, because we know that safety in that space will only lead to better learning too, and that's something that you're conscious of, particularly conscious of this year.
Yeah, specifically twice a week we do a non-math activity that gets them to talk with each other. It might be questions out of an envelope. It might be stand up and hand up and pair up and just talk about some different things that funny, silly, exciting, if we had $1 million type of questions. So intentionally twice a week we do some sort of team or collaborative building, and then throughout the lessons I'll try to sprinkle in those little things, and they're used to interacting with each other because of those 2 times a week that we do them, so that I can have students turn and talk and quickly interact with each other and then get right back into math without much distraction.
Perfect. So we've got about 10 minutes left, 9. So maybe we'll watch a few more minutes, a quick conversation, and then I'm not sure if we want to see the middle or try to see if there's a clunker at the end, but we can kind of move forward as a group from there. We'll take just a few more minutes and then ask maybe 1 or 2 questions off of that. Did I do something?
I think the volume.
What? It looks like it's going in slow motion.
It does.
Yeah. Seems to be working. Okay. Play. Okay, we'll do this. 28.
Maybe a 3. Do you want a base of a 3 or next one?
Oh, yeah.
Let's turn that
Is it
around
that
a bit.
Next one of the 3. What do you want your base to be?
on the right
9.
corner?
If you agree with Sarah, give me a thumbs up. What I'm going to do is set of problems. We're going to run through this quickly. Do me a favor, please. Turn your shoulder partner and tell them what thumbs and then rotate back forward. We're ready.
Okay.
Take a lot less time. Let's do that.
Coach, a lot of videos that way. Okay.
Go. Here's your next problem in your string. If you have an idea, I'd like to see a thumbs up.
Is that volume okay for you, Pam? Scott?
If you have an idea about this problem, you're going to give me a thumbs up. Please feel free to speak up. Jason, you see it? What is the after the thumbs up? What do you got? What would you like to say actually? So you said just squared, so it's 1 x multiplication. 2? Is everybody okay with that? 4 squared is 16. Okay. Here's your next problem. 4 is that Here we go. Here's your next problem in your problem string. I'm going to put a line here so you can just see where the one problem ended and we started a new problem. I'm looking for some thumbs up. Straight up here. I'm going to allow for a quick turn and talk before I take any answers. Quick turn and talk. Make some eye contact. Make some noise with that mouth. Let's go. Tell your partner's Anna. Anna, your partner's Joe.
Is it okay if I speed it up through the turn and talk?
Give me some thumbs up. You have something in your brain. Just right here is fine. Just right here is fine. Isaac, what was something you guys talked about? 0.5 maybe? Maybe 0.5? So times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. 2 to the 4th power would be 16. So we've got the mixed solution, but how did we get there? What if our numbers aren't so neat and pretty next time? What are we, well, I don't know that, but what are we thinking here? Let's make some connections. What do you notice about these two problems here? They both equal 16. So would it be true that I can say that 4x, 4 to the x power, since it's equal to 16, is the same thing as 2 to the 2x power, since that's equal to 16? So let me make a jump here. Let's see if who would follow. Isaac, my conjecture is, since they're both equal to 16, I can take them and set them equal to each other. Again, since this was equal to 16, and this was equal to 16, I set them equal to each other here. How might we make sense of this? If you have an idea of how to make sense of this, how to say it maybe in words that people might understand, how can we make sense of this? James, what are you saying right now?
So, Molly, I guess what questions do we have for Molly? We'll just maybe take one and then move forward from there. So what are some things that we're wondering right now? Yeah, please.
I'm just going to put two quotes together from two different clips I
Sure.
have left on the first one here. The first one, there was a point I noticed where you said, will that thinking help us solve the next problem? And then and this one you said, what do you notice about these two problems here? And my wondering is, how often are you seeing the students say, well, just like that problem over there, we did this, versus how much do you have to say, kind of like, what do you notice about these two over there in terms of reading?
And that was actually something I thought about after the day was done. I'm like, why do I keep erasing the board? So, like, why didn't I leave the string on? Like, at certain points, I erased the board. And I kind of regretted erasing the board because I feel like I'm taking that away from students. Like, I'm the driver of that. So that's actually something I wanted to work on with students, like pushing them to say, well, you see that thing and that thing and that thing, that's how I see the connection. So I thought about that with St. too.
And dealing with how much board space you actually have to.
Yeah, and I was trying to write big because I had recorded Tuesdays and it was, you couldn't see anything. So I was like, for the benefit of people being able to see what we're writing on the board, I was trying to write really big. I don't know if I needed to, I don't know. So that was something else I was trying to think about too.
Sure. Well, you were explicit in drawing those connections because with problem strings, we want to make sure that students are making those connections explicitly and not solving the problems in isolation. And those are a few of the moves that you noticed for her to draw those connections.
Something else too, I don't think it shows up in the video, but I can see what a lot of, like, because the second row of students is really close, I can actually see what's on their papers. And I could hear a lot of the students say they were equal. You don't hear it on the recording. So it sounds like I'm really pushing them, but I had a lot of choral response. And I don't, again, know that's not the best formative assessment, but I felt like my group got it. In other hours, I pushed them a little bit further, but I also know my 6th hour, and I felt like they were there. So I kind of took it and ran with it when I could.
Great. So a couple options. I was just texting with Kelli, and we were granted 5 extra minutes. So we can go from here and continue seeing where this takes us, or we could jump more towards the end. If you'd like to stay here, can we get a sideways thumb? If you'd like to jump towards the end, get a thumbs up. What would you prefer to see? The ending or continue with where we're at in the video? Looks like majority says ending. Okay. I need to tell Molly. I won't yell across it. So maybe we'll take it. 25 would be good. We're going to come back together at 2:25. There's the timer. We've got 5 more. So we'll jump in right here at the 18:30 mark, which will leave us 3 minutes for the conversation, or for this conversation. Oh no.
You might want to go back. I would go back just a little bit too.
Are you talking about like here?
3.
Oh.
What should the exponents be? They should be equal to each other. So if I said 2x equals 3,
Go back to right.
and I solved it.
There's actually kind of something interesting that happened.
3. 27.
Yeah, that's smart.
Seems to me.
A little bit.
3 over 2. Would that be okay? Can you tell me why you were thinking about it as two separate things here?
So you told me that x is 1/2 times 3.
9 by itself can't equal 27. Okay, so you're going to use the square root to make the base of 3. Is that what you're saying to me? Okay. Okay, so you use the square root to reduce the base to a 3, and then the cube to bring that base of 3 up to a 27?
Yeah, that's smart.
So let me see if I can articulate this.
Positioning.
You had 9 to the x power, and you said, I can think about that as 3 squared. Kind of doing the opposite of what you said, like the inverse of what you said. You said take the square root of it. So I did take the square root and I got 3. So I can rewrite 9 as 3 squared. You okay with that? And I'm going to go ahead and bring this x down. And you were telling me something about, like, if I did 3 cubed, I would get 27. So I'm going to rewrite this 27 as 3 cubed. Is it legal what I just did? Did I break any math laws? Is 3 squared 9? Is 3 cubed 27? What do you notice about the bases? When the bases are equal, we can take the exponents. And what would be logical about these exponents? If this base is 3 and that base is 3, what should the exponents be? They should be equal to each other. So if I set 2x equals 3, and I solve for x by dividing by 2, I would get answer, Eric's answer of 3 and 1/2. No, I'm sorry, 3 halves. So let me give you another one and let's see if we can apply it. Here's our last one before we're going to formalize. I have a base, and I'm asking you to solve for x. You can use your shoulder partner, your paper, your eyes, your calculator, figure it out. You are prepared.
So it looks like 125 to the x power equals 25 then? Was that designed to be the clunker then, Molly, or one of the more challenging?
Okay. In the string,
okay.
And I think it's just asking the students, can you do this now? So it was kind of my formative assessment to see if they could carry through everything we talked about. So at the end, use whatever resource, your shoulder partner, your calculator, your eyes, your pencil. What can you do to solve this?
What questions or connections do we have at this point?
And I wish that you could hear it, but like there's like audible excitement at this time. Like students were like I can do this. Like they were, and you don't get it in the video, but like they were like, I can do this. I can attack it. So
Wait, did anyone hear the one student? At least something that stood out to me was, "Oh, I already got it." Yeah. Right? Like I don't need a partner. I don't need paper. I understand the methodology, the strategy to solve that.
I like too that doing proud string allows the kids to talk to us out loud more than, just the one specific one at a time. There's more freedom to, interact with one another.
Yeah.
I like that about it.
Sure. Thank you.
I hadn't seen all day anybody talk about that problem as, like I've heard the answer 3 halves on the problem that we saw just prior to the 125. I hadn't heard anybody say 1/2 times 3 as the response. And I was like, of course, I mean, he's tying it back to what we talked about yesterday. I can make that base whatever I want to make it. I kind of wish I would have pushed the students to get that 3 squared out of them instead of me taking it, but then I was like, you gotta get up.
Sure, pacing. So thank you, Molly, very much for allowing us to just have conversation and learn from this experience. Maybe before we take our seats, if each person could just share one thing that was helpful for them by this last 40 minutes. So we'll just go ahead and popcorn share whenever you're ready. What's one thing that was helpful for you?
I like the pace.
of it. I think it wasn't too fast, wasn't too slow, and it kept student engagement high.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, sir.
I think I like the simplicity of the string. You know, I mean, she teaches algebra 2, but that's a string I can use in my algebra 1 class to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
I liked just this whole format of being able to stop, talk about it, and then watch some more.
I like the natural progression of it, and that students were able to build concepts throughout, but in a natural way. That it wasn't forced on them; they just kind of went step by step.
I appreciated listening to you reflect, because that helped me understand a little bit more what had happened before and after and how things were going with that class. That leaves lots of insight.
Yeah, I appreciated just being able to see it, and that you were so open about, like, I would have done this differently, or, you know, because it gives us that experience to be okay with what we're doing in our classrooms. Like, I also needed that affirmation, because I've done some, but I'm like, I really have no idea if what I'm doing is correct, because I don't have it with my curriculum, so it's just stuff I'm making. So I'm like, okay, I'm close. Like, it was helpful to see that.
I was pretend you don't hear this, but in the morning session we were talking about one of the things we finished talking about it. We were talking about this because she and I were both in the same thing. She said she had tried one and created it with her teaching partner, and then did it in a classroom. She said, and it was a whole lot of messy. And then they met together, tweaked it, and then the other one is going to teach it this next coming week. So I thought that was a beautiful thing that the two of them were working together on one problem string, fixing what was there, and then trying it again so that they could see if it made the improvement. So I could loop in somebody from my district, even though I'm the only one here that's doing this, to say, hey, you want to work on this with me, and do that, because I think that would be fun to be able to make them better.
Yeah. Leverage it with a partner in your building is the easiest, but if you don't have it and you want feedback, maybe just take a screenshot or a picture of your evidence or of your reflection and evidence saying, like, I thought this was going to go well, but problem 3, 4, 5 fell apart. And maybe post that to Google Classroom and say, does anyone have any ideas? So, but thank you for taking that, Nancy.
One thing that sometimes can be a challenge for us is how you feel the wrong answers. And I thought you did a really good job staying positive. People go and try different things, and that's okay. Without, making somebody feel bad or losing positioning or anything like that. And she handled that really well.
Yeah, great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Molly. Really appreciate it. So if it's all right with Molly, we'll make this available as well. Thank you. So, all right, we'll head back to our space. 2. First off, thank you for your openness to lean in, your authenticity in your questioning and the connections that you're making in that space, and then also your flexibility and being able to move and adapt just like you are in the classroom, just like you do in the classroom. So our next step to create further clarity as a collective whole is to just have a small conversation. We're actually going to orient our eyes towards the back of the room in just a moment, and we'll be standing by the Wonderings poster, and Kelli and I will just share some of our thinking relative to your post-it notes that you placed earlier. Knowing you probably have some more clarity now than you may have had an hour ago, but we'll maybe address a few of those post-its before moving on to the next steps. Okay. So if we wouldn't mind turning our chairs and adjusting our eyes and ears towards Kelli in the back.
I've chosen a couple of quick ones first to get us started, and I want to open up the can of rest of stage theoretical questions. First, my instruction comes from picking the right cluster of numbers leading up to the clunker, right? The stress of making it work exactly the way you want it to. And my biggest advice for that is just let go of that fear. You have to just gain that efficacy through doing it, right? And even now, I design some problem strings, and I do it the next week, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know how I wanted it. Every single one is a learning experience, so just let go of that fear. I grabbed all of these. We said we were going to grab one of these.
That's all right. You do you, Kelli. I know that this is our bias, this is our lens, this is where we're at on this journey, so just take that for what it's worth, that we don't have all the answers, unfortunately. We're growing with you through this. So I just grabbed a post-it that said, how do we make a clunker problem that fits but isn't too difficult? My thinking around that is, I don't know. Try something, right? So if it feels like it fits the model of where you're at, you know your students best, so what do you think might challenge them? And try something. And if it's too far, well, you learn something about your students. That's your formative assessment of where they're at. If you try something that's too easy, well, there's your formative assessment that you know that they are capable of hitting that clunker. So it really is, it's just the dance that you live every day in the classroom of how hard and how easy to make it. You know more than you think you do.
There were a couple of questions about making sure everyone participates and student accountability. And I would say a lot of turn and talks, a lot of, I've seen people do work with someone paraphrasing somebody else's thinking, a lot of reflection questions at the end, how to build those in. Also, I know I get very number talkish with this, with it all being mental, but I know middle school, high school allow them to have paper. Maybe that's something in a journal or something of some sort. I don't know your thoughts on that. That's more your cup of tea. With secondary problem strings and writing down their thinking to figure it out, how you can create some accountability there, but that's also that control piece, just we gotta let it go sometimes, right? It's an experience. They will hopefully take something away from it that goes back to your community you've built, and how that plays into student engagement and accountability. So that is another one of those dance things. There's not a perfect answer for it, but there are definitely ways to build in more engagement through turn and talk, through reflection questions, through writing things down.
Mm-hmm. Do you have another that you're comfortable addressing right now?
A lot of questions about resources. Where are the resources for these things? Unfortunately, in elementary, there's not a lot. Fortunately for elementary, they're a lot easier to make than secondary examples. Secondary, they do.
I'll hold it. Sorry, that was very biased of me. Didn't mean to position.
So there are none for elementary. It's up to us to create them. Secondary, there are algebra, pre-algebra, all sorts of complex problem strings that go along with those that are a bit out of my grasp in my brain right now. But just trust yourself to know your kids. Grab a learning target and go from there.
Mm-hmm. And that's how these are all grouped together. A lot of you said, where are the resources? What does it look like at my grade level? Is there a bank of questions? And unfortunately, there aren't. But we will make the best problem strings for our students knowing where they're at. So this makes me think about identity and beliefs of how we view ourselves. You're always looking to improve. Chances are you're always too hard on yourself as a teacher. You are doing good work. You know your students. So my question to you is, what is that model? What is that representation? What is that strategy that you want to focus on for students? What's that bite-sized chunk? And then make a super easy one. Then throw out another one that might be somewhere in the middle. And then just start opening your mind to like, well, what if I change this? And what if I change this? And then you have the professional knowledge and the skills and awareness to sequence those from easy to difficult. But trust yourself that you're not going to hurt your students, and just make it bite-sizable and progressive. Okay. Asking the right questions. Once again, we are really hard on ourselves, but one thing that we found in an implementation guide, it might have even been Brittany's that we saw today, to help you, maybe just write down a question or two that you want to be mindful of and that you want to practice. So I know for the secondary group, one item that came up was the facilitator of the problem string said, what connections are you making between this problem and the one we just did before it? Like, maybe that's my question. Write that on a Post-it note and put it up on the board to remind you as you're talking to students. Just what scaffolds are you providing for yourself to help you? Just like you do for students, help yourself. There's nothing wrong with that.
I put the rest back because we need to move on.
Yep. At least keep me on track. Sounds great. Before we do entirely transition to that space, our window of opportunity is closing for questions on clarity. So once again, we're not meeting till February. So what's that burning question that you have inside that you really would like an answer to before we come back in February? Great. Doesn't seem to be any burning questions. If something pops in your mind, throw it in Google Classroom. If you want it to be private, email one of us directly. So thank you, but trust yourselves. Make it bite-sizable. You're doing good work. Push yourself outside your comfort zone and trust yourself. I have to pause here for a second. So before we dive into implementation guides, this is the afternoon portion of the survey. We had 200 responses from this morning. So way to go, 196 actually. We're hoping to have 32 responses for our breakout session. So I'll pause now for you to access this link and fill out the shorter survey. This is just for the breakout session this afternoon. We'll come back in 2 minutes when I'm standing back in this space. Perfect. Thank you for taking the time to provide feedback for us. We hope that our actions during this time together have been reflective of taking your advice. You really are driving this for us. So we appreciate the feedback you provided in the survey. But if something comes up that you think would be pretty cool to do during session 4, just shoot us an email or just stay after and let us know. Okay. We take that seriously and I appreciate your time. Google Classroom. The next step is that we're going to enter Google Classroom. It seems that many of us have practiced with that, but we will go to Stringin It Along in Google Classroom and then open up our implementation guide. Okay. So this is where we're going to be looking for both verbal and nonverbal cues from you, whether you need help or you're good. So if I get some head nods for like, yep, got it, or hand in the air, what are you talking about? So seeing a few head nods. Okay, thank you. So that'll be the cue to move on. In Google Classroom, we are going to be diving into our implementation guide, planning day 3. So during this session, review your commitment. Does that still make sense to you? Is that something that you want to still commit to, or has your commitment somehow changed? Whether it's the frequency or the types of problem strings you're doing, feel free to adjust those commitments because this is about your professional learning and your professional growth, so you own this. And your intention. What are you going to do? What do you want to do before February? So to help identify what a commitment and an intention might look like, I'm going to pull up the slides from this morning that have a few sentence stems on them. So your intention could use the stem, I'd like to focus on blank because blank. Why are you doing it? I wonder if those are off. I feel like that's a commitment. So your commitment, excuse me, I feel like the alignment on these are off. And the pointer's not working. So, the focus on blank because blank, that would be your commitment. So similar how I think Brittany mentioned access. So she, or maybe it was Molly, mentioned that they wanted students to have access because blank. That would be a commitment that they want to make to themselves. The implementation here is your intention. I plan to implement problem strings in my classroom on a weekly basis or on a 2 to 3 times a week basis. So this sentence stem right here would be aligned to your commitment, your intention, excuse me. Intention using this stem. At this time, we'll pause for you to complete your commitment and intention. Kelly and I will float around and allow you to ask questions if you have any. So prior to February, this is really a time for you to exercise your knowledge of problem strings. The sessions, the MichME sessions and days were specifically designed to be front-loaded to create that understanding and clarity for ourselves as a team and as a network, so we can create that understanding before having a bit of a break from November until February. So this is your time to really try some things out. Get your hands dirty and dive in and trust yourself. So follow through with your intention and gather some of that evidence. Whatever that evidence might be for you. But why might this be important? What do you think was the drive behind implementation guides? Nancy?
So that we're not doing this as professional development, we're doing it as professional learning. We're not taking it back
Yeah, it's hard, right? I'm in your seat very often as well, and it feels like, why are they doing these things to me? So we lean into that discomfort. And Nancy said it's that professional learning. It's holding on and making that permanent change for ourselves and holding ourselves accountable. Makes me think about digging for gold. Right? Where are we digging for gold? And how are we pushing ourselves to find that? Okay. So we have a choice to make, whether we see this as a burden, something that's holding us down. We know we're super busy. Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. So we can view it as one other thing to do. Or we could make the choice of saying, this is hard, but it's going to be good for me on my journey to commit to this and practice this as I look down on myself on the journey. So we just have a choice to make. And I hope that you view Kelli and I as supports for you in this process. We definitely want to provide those equitable outcomes for you. So whatever supports you might need, please contact us. And I'll write down our emails over here in a second. But know that we're your cheerleaders, we're your coaches. We want to make sure that you are successful throughout this process. And we believe in you. So, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
It was a good one.
I do believe in you. So moving forward, this actually ties in perfectly. You are part of the district math team. You are identified as leaders in your space, your buildings, your grade levels, your districts. You are sent here for a reason, and you have a responsibility to your students and your colleagues to help impact that change for students. So if you have questions, we need to change this, because you don't need to just send it to Rusty. You can contact any one of us, but know that we are district supports and countywide supports for you and West Michigan, for those outside of Kent County. But how are you planning on being that change agent within your building and then your grade level and classroom as well? So you're here for a reason, and you are leaders, and we're here to support you. Still impressed with our timing, Kelli. So we'll pause for a moment, and the closing process is a stand-in share. So what that means is, once you have your response to this prompt on the screen, feel free to push your chair back, stand up, and then speak into the room your response, and then take a seat, and someone else will share their thinking into the room. So we'll pause for a moment, and whenever you feel like you have a response to this prompt, feel free to stand and share for our group.
I missed the second session, so my commitment is just going to be to create and try one.
My commitment is to roll out the problem strings to all of my groups. I've got 11 or 12 different math intervention groups, so roll it out to all of them.
My commitment is to continue to move forward looking at the resources that I have, but to push the ownership and the thinking about the why behind the problem strings to my students. So being more conscious about asking them to reflect afterwards. What are they carrying with them, and what are questions they still have?
I also missed the second session, so I got a chance to see a really nice one from Molly over here, and I really liked the pace of it and how she did her questioning, and it was very purposeful in lots of different areas. So.
My goal going back is to catalog and organize the resources that I do compile, so that I have them for future use, and to make sure that I make little notes and reflective and evaluative feedback for myself, so that I know when I need to tweak things for the future, but I also have those resources for myself.
To using some problem strings that involve subtraction, because addition seems easy to me. So subtraction would be a personal thing that would be hard. So I will commit to introducing those to my students.
I tried a few
problem strings in the past months, and then I did the topic on area, and then I feel like my students' understanding is way better than how I taught before. So I'm excited about it, and I'm going to try more problem string, other math topics too. And I'm thinking to invite my principal to come over to observe some part of my math lesson, and then kind of just bring it up to the building level.
I was new to this session today too, so I look to kind of implement this more concretely. I try things like it, but just be more purposeful in design, and use it as a way for students to create their own pathways and build understanding, so that way they can kind of be self-reflective and take ownership of what they're trying to get out of each day.
I want to just continue along this path and use more of these, and like Molly was saying, collect them, because I'm not very good at doing that, so that like next year I can go, oh hey, maybe I'll just look at this and then see which one I started with and use that at least as a jumping off point.
Anyone else care to share? Perfect. Well, we appreciate your engagement and intensity today. There were a lot of heavy ideas and topics thrown out, and we appreciate your engagement and your commitment to professional learning. So we'll put our email addresses on the whiteboard behind Kelly. If you need anything, post in Google Classroom or email us directly, and we'd be happy to connect.
And please post to Google Classroom. A lot of us, so many sticky notes up there, so we wish we had more resources for these. As you do them, even if you feel like they were a flop in your classroom, it's a starting off point for somebody else, right? So please, please, please be more active in Google Classroom, and we will do our parts also to be active there and grow our community.